Hello, and welcome to the Merri-Cast, the show that puts you on the fast track to confidence when starting and growing your business. My guest this week is Sandra Healy. She's the co-founder and CEO of Inclusio, the leading platform for people data capture and compliance reporting. The journey of Inclusio started several years before its formal launch, emerging from her 20 years of experience working in engineering and leadership roles in global tech. And in common with many of our listeners, she was initially a fledgling entrepreneur who started as an intrapreneur, spinning the idea for Inclusio out from Dublin City University. Through 4 years of research and development, she was joined by her two co-founders, Deborah and Arthur, and spun it out in 2020, just as the pandemic struck. Now, it was an unpromising backcloth in which to launch a business, but it's a great story of a few downs, but mostly ups. And there's so much more to Sandra as well. She's got such a great story to tell, an inspiration to anybody who's ever felt like a small cog in a big machine, but had a dream to do things their way. Here it is. Here's her story.
Yeah, I've had an interesting career, Trevor. I think my CV is probably about 5 pages long, if not more, at this stage. So my early background, I spent 20 years in the global telecoms industry, working across the UK and Ireland. Vodafone was actually the last company I worked in, and I started out as a technical engineer. And over the years, then moved into different roles in sales, customer delivery, and customer experience. But in parallel to that, I studied psychology and organizational psychology. And I've been involved in people and culture and DEI for 20 years over that amount of time, but mainly on a voluntary basis. And I think it's the combination of all of those things that brought me to entrepreneurship and brought me to being one of the founders of Inclusio.
And so, with that background, I mean, you mentioned the engineering sort of side of things. You were trained as an engineer. You studied that at university.
It was technical engineering. So I was one of the people that would design, so architect, build, and install and test things like VPNs, global networks, and things like that. So it was very much in the early days of telecoms. So rather than you learning in university, it was more around learning on the job, in the learning around things like Linux and IP and all of those kind of things. So it was more kind of learning on the job.
Now, one of my sons is an engineer, and he often, approaches problems in a very logical, dispassionate sort of way. I mean, that's a world away, if you like, from what you then went on to train in sort of psychology and so on. I mean, what did you? I mean, was there a sort of a good mix? Were you able to sort of bring a sort of a level of a slightly different approach to that training as well?
Yeah, I remember because I studied while I worked, and I always remember people used to say to me all the time, "Oh, now that you're finished your degree, or now that you're finished your master's, when are you going to start using it?" And I would say, well, I use it all the time because psychology is very much around people, and it's about understanding people, and for me, my passion, and that's what brought me to organizational psychology, was very much around people in work. And if I was to think about the voluntary work I did around equity in the roles that I was in, for me it was very much around driven by a sense of fairness. So for me it was around does everybody have equitable opportunities here? No matter what your difference, do you have equitable access to opportunities? Are you treated in the same way? All of that. So I think it was more. I have a passion for the engineering side. I love that designing and the challenge that came about around, seeing something that was designed on a sheet of paper. Now all of a sudden it's live and it's working, and configuring firewalls and all sorts of things like that. So I love that, but equally I was passionate about the people. So for me, the people that I worked with, the teams that I worked in. And then as I got older and I started to recognize then that things were not the same for everybody. So for example, I had some of my colleagues who were neurodivergent, for example, come to me and say, I don't feel comfortable asking for what I need here, or I'm struggling with this particular thing. Or members of the LGBT plus community, for example, saying, look, I don't feel comfortable talking about my where I was at the weekends and my life outside work, and also like my female colleagues, for example, taking time out to for their families and coming back into work and having to start like their sales and account management careers all over again. So it was all of these things that I saw. And through my deep rooted sense of fairness, I thought, okay, don't step over this. Let's find a way to address this and at least raise awareness of it.
And at this point, I mean, did you have a sort of the restless curiosity that is a feature of many entrepreneurial journeys? I mean, had this kind of emerged in you? I mean, we'll get on to the kind of co-founding of Inclusio in a second, but I'm saying, were the seeds of entrepreneurialism sort of there for you at that point, or were they sort of lying dormant?
Yeah, I think when I look back over my career, I think it's described as intrapreneurship, right? So that's when you're in an organization and you're always looking for how do you solve the problems or address the problems. And over the years, I've been the one that's helped organizations get, move into new markets or launch a new product and training teams and things like that. And even throughout my career, certainly my time in Ireland. I would have been recognized as if you want, you want to launch into a new market and do something in telco, you go and, Sandra would be able to help with that. So, yeah, and I think that entrepreneurial spirit, if we can call it that, has always been there. And for me, what I always found is that it takes me about 2 years to kind of master something. And then I'm kind of going, right, what's next? Give me something else. What's next? And I've certainly found that in my career. In the early days, it was move company. And then over time, I realized actually, no, why don't you just find something else to do? So when I started in a role, I was nearly had my eye on what the next thing I was going to be doing and working towards that all the time.
Okay, so there was something there, even if it was within a kind of organization rather than outside an organization. Could you just tell me sort of, not just the founding of Inclusio, but the kind of the build up to that? So was there given your previous work, was that a natural step for you, or did it just suddenly hit you one day, this is what I want to do?
That's an interesting one because people around me would say that I was talking about it and I knew it was always there and part of my journey. And then I look back and go, was it? I don't remember that. I don't remember saying it. But for me, it was that struck, right? When I was in Vodafone, I was leading this one particular project I was working on was a global customer experience program. And what I realized is I was in every second week presenting stats and data. And I realized that the very meaningful work I was doing around people and culture, I had zero evidence, no data, no KPIs. And yet, while I was studying the organizational psychology, I was learning all around the science of culture and how you measure and understand people in work. And it was the combination of all of those things. I had the technology background. And then I was thinking, right, how can we combine the technology and the psychology together in a way that brings a scientific, evidence-based approach to people and culture? Because what leaders were saying to me is, culture is not my top priority. I can't measure it. If I can't measure it, it's not going to be one of the top three things I focus on. So it was that for me, that was the catalyst of saying, I'm going to do something about this. So that was the start. That was the start of the idea.
You get these CEOs saying, sorry, Sandra, it's a bit fluffy, this culture thing. And, and I don't know what to do. And you're thinking, well, actually, that's not right. I do have the answer. And I mean, what did that then directly lead to Inclusio, which you co-founded? We should say that. Maybe just tell us a bit about what Inclusio is, perhaps, as part of that.
Yeah, so that was back in 2016, Trevor. So I was reading and hearing a lot of research as well, not just in the company I was in, but outside, leaders. There was one particular piece of research I remember by Accenture talking about the leader disconnect, right? And they were saying that 76% of leaders think they create these empowering, enriching environments where people can thrive and be themselves, and yet only 36% of people in those companies agreed. Okay, so this disconnect has always been there, and when I started to dive into that and try and understand that more, this was the thing that was coming to me is leaders saying, "I can't measure it, Sandra. I can't measure it, and I don't have any data. It's very difficult for me to have it as a priority." So in 2016, I describe it as it was myself and 10 slides. I made the bold move of saying, right, if I don't do it now, it's not going to happen. And I spun the idea for Inclusio into Dublin City University. That's where I had studied my master's. And I did a bit of research and found out that Enterprise Ireland can support you through research and development from a commercialization funding perspective. So that's what I did, took the brave move and said, right, I'm going to do this. So 10 slides. And that's really how the whole thing started. And I set out to understand first, what's the problem I'm trying to address here. So we did deep dive research with over 36 global organizations. And what we found is leaders were saying to us, we don't know who we have in the organization. We want to be reflective of our customers and our communities, but people don't want to give us their data. The second thing they were saying is, we think we're doing really good work around, inclusion and culture, but we don't know are we doing the right things in the right part of the business. We've no way to measure it. So, and then when we spoke to the employees in the same companies, they were saying to us, we do not like disclosing personal things about ourselves and having that attached to our records and the HR systems. And they were saying, we want to be heard, we want to be part of the solution, but we don't necessarily trust the internal mechanisms. So we had to try and figure out, how are we going to address that for the employer and the employees? And that's exactly what Inclusio does. So we built designed and built the platform. We describe it as it's based on behavioral science nudge. And what we do is help organizations get a deep dive on on the people in the organization, and help them get a sense of how they're experiencing the culture at every level in the organization. And we play this back through analytics dashboards, where we're able to pinpoint exactly where the organization needs to take action.
So immediately, with that kind of talk around things that you can measure, you've kind of not only got the HR director on your side, but maybe the CFO is suddenly taking an interest in this. I mean, how quickly did Inclusio grow? Is this the point where you started it with Deborah and Arthur, or was that at the same time, or was that a separate
Yeah,
one?
so I brought the idea into the university, and then I persuaded Deborah and Arthur to leave their jobs and come in and join me. Thankfully, they did. So because it's the combination really of the three of us that's brought Inclusio to the world. So I describe the work that Arthur and I do. He's data science, right, and I'm behavioral data science. So between us, we were able to make sure that we built an ethical AI system, designed ethical algorithms. From Deborah's perspective, she spent 20 years working in startups, right? So she was leading engineering team. She's an engineer. So it was brilliant between the three of us, that we were able to innovate and also attract a very diverse team, which was really, really important. That we were able to build in the people that we wanted to represent, build it into the design and the architecture of the system. And essentially, we did that over 4 years of research and development in the university.
That's fantastic. What a great way to start a business, because already there's a ready market for it.
Yeah.
Sort of as you start to build. What was it? I mean, you talked about your complementary strengths. I mean, what was it like for you personally? Sort of, okay, you've been working in this incubator at Dublin, but was it a bit of a culture shock in other ways? From you've been working in these big global companies, suddenly, it's just you, two other people. If the printer breaks down, nobody's there to mend it. The internet goes down, or you've got to sort it out. I mean, was there a sort of a bit of a culture shock for you personally in moving from a very, very big company to one that you were just starting up?
Yeah, I suppose for me, I kind of transitioned from the corporate life into higher education, right? Because I was 5 years in the university. I actually established the DCU Centre of Excellence for Diversity and Inclusion and ran that while I was in the university as well. So for me, I was going from corporate to academia. And at the
First of
same
all,
time, then
yeah, yeah.
I had this entrepreneurial project on the go then as well. It's an interesting one, right? Because I suppose the fact that it was very easy for me to do probably reinforces that I have that entrepreneurial mindset. And even if I think about who I was when I was working in a corporate organization, I was the person that could get the printer sorted. I was the person that could get get the network going. So there was little reliance for me on other people. I was well able to do it myself. So there wasn't too much of a culture shock, if we can call it that then. In some ways, I actually really enjoy it. I have because I have the commercial background, I have the technical background, I have the psychological expertise. What I love about what I do now is I'm able to work across the business in lots of different ways. And that's very exciting to see something that was in my head in 2016 is now a physical, it's in the world and having a huge impact for employers and for people in work. Like that's incredible. You can never expect that's going to happen, so I really enjoy that.
Okay, one more question then on the team with you and Deborah and Arthur. I mean, apart from your complementary skills, I mean, were they friends before you set up the business, or did you just know them as professional colleagues in some way and then set it up? I'm just interested. Sometimes people who are friends set up a business and it goes really badly wrong. So what were the
Yeah.
ingredients of it actually going so right in your case?
Yeah, it's almost like serendipity, Trevor. You couldn't if you were to, you would think that the universe was aligning in some ways, right? Like myself and Deborah met, we're both NLP master practitioners, and would you believe that we met through learning through NLP together? And like that takes a long time to get to that level. So we just happened to meet talking about this work. And then I remember the two of us having a conversation saying, we need tech. We need somebody. And it just happened to be that a friend of ours, we met Arthur one day, cycled up to we were parked outside and he cycled up to the window and we said, what do you do, Arthur? And he goes, oh, I work and blah. And the two of us just looked at each other and went, we need you, Arthur. So it's like who knew, And like we're the best of friends. We're very, very close. We get on really well together. We've a lot of respect for each other and understanding, and we're part of each other's lives. We're intrinsically linked now, not just in business, but also personally as well. So
And building on that, I mean, the ship rarely sort of sails in a completely smooth way. I mean, what have been the big challenges for you as a team or you individually in this kind of inclusio world as you've started
yeah.
to develop it? I mean, what have been the perils as well as the prizes along the way?
Yeah, I think the first one, Trevor, is we spun out of the university in December 2020, right straight into the world of COVID. So that was the first challenge. But like we had to follow the path. We had the plan ready to go. So that was a big challenge when it came to raising investment, because everybody was in lockdown. There was no opportunity to go and meet people. So we had to try and figure that out. And I know I was interviewed at one point and I think we were doing a calculation that I had to pitch over 40 times, right? And that's the reality of it, of not actually being able to go and meet people and get people physically in a room. So that was a challenge, I would say. One of the more recent ones, I think, is probably just what's going on in the world. We were very much seen as kind of the DEI platform, right? Which look at what's going on in the world now. DEI must DIE. Like that's really not very helpful for any of us. So for us, we had to listen to what's going on in the world and think about, well, where do we fit into this, right? So we had to look at how do we pivot, how we position and talk about what we do. We still do the same things, right? We capture over 80 demographic data points. That's on everybody. That's everything from neurodiversity to pets to caring responsibilities to lots of different things about understanding your workforce. The other thing then we do is measure culture, psychological safety, trust, job supports, well-being, belonging. That's all of us, okay? And it's culture. So we had to try and figure out while all of this narrative is going on in the world, how do we position Inclusio and make sure that we still continue to have an impact and employers see the value that we bring. So for the past 18 months, we've had to look at that, our messaging, how do we position ourselves, which sectors find what we're doing really useful and really, really need us. So that's been that every day in startup, you get up to something new that you hadn't anticipated. But then at the same time, you also have to be seen around the corner, right, of what's coming down the road. And certainly 18 months ago, we saw the world that we're in today.
I mean, you mentioned it yourself. The DEI is under pressure, if you like, in the news, media. I mean, obviously that's affecting one country in particular. And without getting too much into that, do you almost act as not just as a supplier or a partner, but almost a counselor, if you like, now for people who are working in DEI, because the profession and that sort of area is under pressure about how they can keep these things, which, to me, self-evidently are not just good things, but necessary things to do for a business, when actually the narrative is changing slightly.
Yeah, and I think like DEI is quite can be quite a technical term, right? What's diversity? Diversity is all of us. Every one of us are individually different. So if I think when we start to break it down and understand it in real terms, inclusion, what's inclusion or equity? These are things that the reasons why our mothers can vote, for example. Like all of these things, like we've all worked really hard to have an equitable world, to be included and to be counted and to be heard and to be valued for our individual differences. So I know there's a counter narrative to that at the moment, and hopefully we'll be able to weather the storm. But nonetheless, the challenge around talent attraction, talent retention, keeping people productive and connected into the success of your business, like all of those things don't go away no matter what the narrative is, right? You've humans here, and you have to look after your humans if you want to get the best out of them. And that's what we help you do, right? The system, it's a gamified platform. It's very personal. It's very much feels like it's about you and it's for you. And then the analytics then help the leaders then take informed action around what do we need to focus on and what are the things we need to do to make sure we're getting the best out of our humans. So that's never going to go away. As long as you're an employer and you're based on people and the sustainability of your business is based on people, you're going to need to know who have you got and how they're experiencing the culture. And it's as simple as that, really.
And that's a great answer, I think, particularly in the sort of current political climate. As you said, I hope we sort of weather the storm on that. Have there been any other sort of challenges you've had along the way? I mean, how many of you are there? I mean, is it just the three of you, or are there others in teams behind you? I mean,
Yeah, we're up to just under 15 people now at the moment, and we have people in different parts of the world, and then we have collaborators like organizational psychologists in different parts of the world that we work with as well. And that's something that's really important for us because, the platform is based on, and the insights that we capture is based on individual differences and understanding people. So for us, it's really important that we understand the local context. So for example, we've rolled Inclusio out in the US for lots of different customers in different sectors, like construction, for example, financial services and aviation. So we need to understand the local context there and make sure that when people engage with Inclusio, that they're in it. It's part of them. And equally the same then, for example, in the UK, Trevor, we have to make sure we understand the context there and make sure that people feel that they're in it. So for us, we're very conscious of that, of working with people on the ground and making sure that we're using local expertise wherever we need to.
Okay, and that's great. So in terms of where the business is and how the business develops next, how can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so it's interesting. When we built the platform, we were very much influenced by the financial regulators demanding people and culture data from the financial services organizations. So a lot of our clients are financial services, like mainly insurance, for example. We started to do a lot of work on benchmarking with insurance companies. And if I look at what's happening across the globe, in the UK, for example, you have the Financial Conduct Authority now. There's a plan to standardize the data, and they're expecting to have action plans and strategies of how the workforce is more inclusive and representative. And that's exactly where Inclusio comes in, right, to help organizations with that. If I look at what's happening in other parts of the world, the CSRD and ESG, environmental, social, and governance standards, are starting to drive more requirements for data and representation data and evidence of you being a good employer. So really for us, in some ways, I kind of feel like we were a little early to the market, right? Because we produce scientific, credible data, it helps you report on things like gender pay gap, regulatory reporting into the financial regulator, but also then on a global level around things like supply chain audits and things like that, and ESG then, where the social sustainability piece then in the ESG.
Okay, regular listeners will know that I've worked with the HR community sort of, quite a lot in the past. Do you think that there is a bit of a skills gap then in terms of if you are talking to people about the data and so on, that people, the HR professionals know they need the data to make a case or show results or so on. But are HR professionals generally comfortable in your experience with data and analytics, or is there a bit of a sort of skilling up job to be done there?
I think that like there's a lot of really good HR systems, and certainly they've come along over the years, and they've become like a single source, right, of truth almost around your people. However, the big challenge that I find as I speak to HR leaders is there's a lack of data. So the data is incomplete because when it comes to, particular like protected characteristic data, like around sexuality and gender, race, ethnicity, disability, things like that, like people are reluctant to have that data connected to their HR record or in a way that they can be identified. And like that's just, unfortunately, that's the direction the world is going. Lack of trust, lack of psychological safety. What's this data going to be used for? So you could have the best systems, you could be a data expert, but you're still going to have that fundamental problem, right? Of that lack of trust of people disclosing. And that's what we address, Trevor. So we've found and developed a gamified way. It sits outside the organization. We've proven that people trust us with their data. We get over 80% completion in every sector that we work in. And that's brilliant because you have deep understanding of who have I got, and then we're able to intersect that with the culture, so you understand how each group are experiencing the culture. So I think HR professionals, the fundamental problem you have is the one thing you can't control is that people won't give us their data, right? So and then you have the regulator putting pressure on saying, where's your data? Who have you got in your organization? How are they experiencing the culture? Are you representative? And they don't have that information. They're going, well, I can't set targets on incomplete data. So it's a bit of a risk. It's creating a gap. So thankfully, that's where Inclusio comes in.
Great, and so it's more a problem of getting hold of the data or meaningful data in the first place. Once it's there, then obviously the likes of you and others can sort of help on that side of things. In terms of the corporate picture, I mean, what do you think, looking back, that you've learned so far on your entrepreneurial journey? I mean, either individually or as part of the team. I mean, what are there things that you've thought, well, that went quite well, didn't it? Or actually, I wish we'd known this earlier, and then we wouldn't have spent all this time doing, heading down slightly down the wrong way on something. Are there things that you've learned along the way?
Yeah, I think I'm happy with the way we went around our product development, Trevor. So because I've seen others fall on that, right? And we made a very conscious decision in the early days to take the long route of make the system learning from our own data. Okay, so we don't like scrape data from outside and bring it in. So our system learns, and our ethical AI engine learns from what people are putting into the system. So the humans in a sector, the humans in a company, they determine what the culture is. They determine their individual differences. And it's a slow way to go about it, right? But here we are, we're 8 years later now, and we're on the other side of it. And I'm really happy with the way we making those early decisions of, you know what, let's research a culture model, let's test it in the market, let's standardize it. So we now have the 64 points of inclusive culture across 17 sub-dimensions. And it is really, it's peer reviewed. You can stand over it. Like that's taken 8 years to do that, right? We could have just picked somebody else's model up and plugged it in and hope for the best. We didn't. So certainly for me, I'm happy that we did that. And that allows us now to do sector benchmarking and things like that, in a very credible way. I think having the opportunity to spin the idea into the university, like I say that when I meet budding entrepreneurs, I say, look, if you need that kind of level of expertise and academic insight in what you're doing, certainly in Ireland, Enterprise Ireland, absolutely fantastic around supporting you with that through commercialization, because you can tap into your academic team and bring a team together to help you with the research. So it's a slower route, okay? And some people might say, well, no, I want to get to the market faster. I have to say I'm happy sitting here now that we took the slower route, because now we have insights that don't exist anywhere else in the world, right? And they're credible. We can stand over them, we can academically publish on them, and we can give real insights to organizations that just are not there from anywhere else.
Okay, so as collectively or individually, you were patient enough to allow that process to emerge, even though it was slightly so. Were you impatient at all yourself? Sort of even by doing it that way. I mean, at the time, I mean, now you can look back with the sort of the benefit of hindsight, but at the time, were you pushing for things to go harder, or were you quite content in that way?
No, I think I was quite content in that way because I'm a perfectionist, right? So I'm very much around, getting things right. I'm also, the psychologist and the science piece in me is evidence-based, credible. So for me, I think when you start to combine all of those things and then with the tech and the engineering background, I think there's a good combination there. I think, the learning about being a perfectionist is if you're going to get other people to do things, it's probably never going to be done the way you expect or want, right? So that's the learning as an entrepreneur. But in relation to the platform that we've built and the tech and how it works, I'd say myself, Deborah, and Arthur are very much aligned, and we're probably all perfectionists, and we're very proud of it. I have to say, very proud of the platform and what we've brought to the world. So that's worked out really well for us.
And being perfectionist has kind of helped you develop a great product, and
Yeah.
so that has its obvious sort of merits. Now we want to give listeners the confidence they need to succeed. So my last question really is, what advice would you give to the budding entrepreneurs you just mentioned, particularly those who want to start a business, not necessarily by themselves, but with someone?
Yeah, I always say if it's in your blood, like entrepreneurship, if it's in you, it's kind of like I would describe it as if you're the kind of person that wants to go travel and you have to go because if you don't do it, it's always going to be one of those things you regret. And certainly I feel that entrepreneurship is the same. And I think we're in a very different world now. There's lots of supports out there. Like even if you look at the narrative of what's happening in Europe now around, there's more supports, there's more funds around trying to keep innovation and support innovation in Europe. And I see even the UK now putting lots more funding and supports behind diverse entrepreneurs and things like that. There's no better time, I don't think, in the world to get the support you need to bring something to the world. Also, I would say don't be discouraged if it's just you and your idea, right? Because like even here now, I see we're based in Dog Patch Labs in Dublin, right? And they have an event coming up in a couple of weeks' time where entrepreneurs get to pitch to a room of engineers and then to try and do matching, founder matching. Like there's loads of different programs like that around. So what I would say is if you've got a great idea, if it's in your blood, you got to do it. And stand on the cliff and jump empty-handed into the void, right? There's no better way. It's a very exciting journey, and I don't know, I couldn't have it any other way. So if it's in you, do it.
So thank you to Sandra for being such an incredible guest. After talking to her, I loved in particular her lessons at the end there, didn't you? I always felt that you regret the things you don't do rather than the things you do. And Sandra confirms this. I mean, she says there's a lot of support and funding for new entrepreneurs, and there's no better time to bring something to the world, as she says. And don't be cowed by it all if it's just you and your idea. There are so many ways, Sandra says, to showcase and test out what you do. So many opportunities to find someone to take an interest in what you do and help you get started. And she says at the end, stand on the cliff and jump into the empty void. If it's in you, do it. That from someone who is doing it very, very well indeed. So thank you to Sandra, and thank you to you, our growing band of listeners. And if you enjoyed today's episode, we'd love for you to subscribe, rate and review through your usual podcast provider. And if you want to find out more about the Merri-Cast or our business Merrible Media, you can find us on LinkedIn. Don't forget to join us for our next episode, but until then, thanks for listening.